Thank you for joining us on today's Renewed Minds. This edition is brought to you by the Blacksburg Interfaith Food Pantry. The Interfaith Food Pantry is a joint ministry of over 25 churches of various denominations in Blacksburg, Virginia. This ministry is a well-known proponent of self-sufficiency, a hand up, not a handout, working with our community's most vulnerable residents, including homeless, the disabled, and struggling young families. For more information, contact Church on Main at office@churchonmain.church for more details. During the podcast, we'll be discussing challenges and opportunities we all face, no matter what season of life we're in. Each episode will offer some practical tips we've learned over the years and also share how love and grace can help each of us while we're trying to maintain hope. Today we have in our studios Senior Pastor of Church on Main, Tommy McDerris, and the owner and coach of Life in Action, Tanya Dinkle. Today's topic, Blessings Reimagined. You've heard the quote, nothing is guaranteed. We're the most confident when plans we make are taking us towards the type of life we desire. However, how we deal with the twists of fate will make a significant impact on the type of life we actually live.
I have had more than one twist of fate during the course of the years that I've been doing ministry and in life. And some of them turned out really well, and some of them didn't turn out quite so well and were just not enjoyable. And I think just about everybody could say they had some of the same things.
I have exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my life certainly today does not look like what I thought it would look like. When I'm thinking back, looking forward, I have had experiences that I didn't expect I would have, both good and bad. But wow, what I've learned from those, and without those, I wouldn't have what I have today, which is a blessing.
My life doesn't look anything like I thought it would look because if it looked like I thought it would look, I'd be a history professor today. Oh. It didn't turn out quite that way. I had one of those strange moments called a call of God, and I remember it like it was yesterday and scared me to death.
Well, I would argue, though, that you do still teach history.
No, that is
You
correct.
very much do. First of all, you're a history buff, and I think at this point in the podcast, probably most of our listeners know that because you love to share history. In these, which is fantastic, but also biblical history, because that comes up in all of your sermons, and you love to share the story behind the story so that people can really understand and try to connect with that.
Well, that's true. All of that is a fact. Yeah. So, my love of history comes out in my sermons. I would never have imagined that.
I know. It's maybe one of those unintentional things where our passions come through.
Oh.
All right. So life doesn't always turn out the way that we expect it. For me personally, I've had some things that knocked me down, some things that totally took me out. And I've had several points in my life where I knew acutely in that moment, this is a choice. And I have to make a choice of how I'm going to move forward, if I'm going to move forward, and what that's going to look like. And there's always lots of choices when you're in those moments. And hopefully, when we're looking at those, and we'll dig into this today, hopefully we can see, that may not be the healthier of the options on the table, right? Because there's always at least one that is like, probably not the best choice, but it is an option. But even in the hurt, even in the anger, even in the frustration, and even in the disappointment, there are things to be learned and taken that you can build gratitude on down the road.
That's a good way to put it, build gratitude on, because I can look back on a number of things that I did not enjoy at all at the time, but some of the things that came out of it or some of the lessons I learned in that, I'm grateful for down the line. Yeah. The tough part, though, is when you've had a twist of fate that's come up and you suddenly realize it was your fault.
That's humbling.
That one's not fun. I've had a couple of those. I've had a couple of those in recent years where I just made a clear mistake, and it created problems, and it was my fault that it created the problem. Yeah. A couple of them were not from the circumstance that other people think they are, but you can't tell that without hurting somebody else. Right. And so you just have to live with the situation that you created, that you didn't really mean to create. Yeah. I hate it when my mistakes are my fault.
I think most of us would agree with that.
I always want to find some other reason why. It was somebody else's fault. But sometimes mine are just my fault.
Yeah, sometimes it is that way. We are human. We are not divine, and we will make mistakes.
I don't like to think of myself as not being human, but
well,
it's just
you are human.
Yes,
just to ground you today.
Make sure everyone knows that.
To ground the rest of us, let's just kind of go to the foundation of what we're talking about. So when we talk about a twist of fate, this on the surface, definitely things that we don't foresee, things that can disrupt our plans. This can be, it can be an event, it can be a loss, it can be rejection of some sort, it can be a failure, it can be just a bad choice, right? That just twists things around of what the outcome is going to be. These events and experiences can feel random. They can feel unfair. They can cause a lot of emotion, anger, both inward and outward, as you were just saying. It's when we make mistakes, we tend to get angry at ourselves. But if it's not our mistake and we are just caught up in the casualties of that, then that's still frustrating, and there's anger there.
The last time we did a podcast like this, I asked Tanya to give an example, and it caught her off guard. But yes. So I'll jump on something and give an example here, and not put her on the spot at this moment. But we've talked about it a couple of times here. Is the Virginia Tech shootings, that mass shooting that occurred in 2007 completely upended everything, and it stayed upended for years, and for some people it still is. It hasn't changed anything like that. I remember that day well, and truly thought, as I was driving to the hospital that day, this is going to shape everything for years to come. That we were not going to be able to change what had happened. How are we going to make something good out of something so bad? And even as I was going to the hospital, I didn't know how bad it was, but I knew it was terrible. So
yeah, and I think that's such a blessing, and I've shared that on a previous episode too, about being in the moment of some sort of crisis and being acutely aware of the impact that the situation you're in is going to have. For me, it was the loss of my mom. I'm sure it's probably happened some other time. I know it's happened since then as well, but that was kind of the big one that I remember initially. I think sometimes, though, we are on a path that we don't always acutely know is shaping us for the future. And for me, I think that the biggest one that I have is, I am very happily married. I love my husband with all my heart. We've been together about 7 years. We've been married 5.5. And as a result of us getting married, I have got 2 of the most amazing bonus children that you could ever imagine. There's 2 of the best humans on earth. That is not how I thought my life was going to be. When I thought, 20 years ago, oh, I'm going to get married, or 25 years ago, oh, well, my mom got married at this age, so I'll get married at that age. And I'll have children at this age because that's what my mom did. And then looking for that right partner, and it's not working, and trying to figure out what's not working, not realizing that these twists and the steps that I was taking were shaping me to figure out who I was and what I wanted and what I needed. And that twist led me to the life that I have now, which I wouldn't trade for anything, but wow, not at all what I expected.
Oh yeah, just those kind of things come in life. You have those moments. I've told in here before of that I was was expecting anything in the world but to feel called to the ministry when I was 17 years old. And you may not have noticed this, but most 17-year-old boys are not real interested in being in the ministry. That may have.
It's not a popular field at that age.
It's not a popular thing to do at that age, and I really didn't want to do it. And I had some things I wanted to do at 17. It didn't fit the ministry at all.
I can't imagine you being obstinate on anything.
So that was one though that caught me off guard that I finally did live into. And wouldn't trade anything for the opportunity, for the changes that it brought in my life, for the future that it gave me. But it wasn't a welcome moment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
I kind of felt like Moses when the burning bush started, and he said, "Well, I want you to go back to Israel And oh, by the way, I know that king back there wants to kill you, but I still want you to go back there and set my people free.
Do it anyway.
And Moses said, no, I don't think so. I would rather not do that.
Well, this goes back to the control. We talked about this in our first episode. We talked about faith, right? Where it makes us uncomfortable when we have to relinquish control for any reason. And when you start thinking about, releasing that control of what your future is going to look like and take fate and the twists and turns of life that put you on this odd path, that's a lack of control. And that makes us really uncomfortable.
It makes you really uncomfortable when you're on the verge of being a control freak.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I like being in control.
I was going to say, neither of us know what that feeling is like at all.
We would both relate well to that one. I really don't like feeling out of control in whatever situation I'm in. I remember, here's one of my past stories, but I got drunk one time in my life. I had way too much.
Can't wait to hear
drink.
this.
And it was just not a good night at all. But I remember well, just before I don't remember anything, I remembered very well thinking, if something goes wrong, I can't handle it. Because I was in emergency services and all of those kind of things, and it clicked with me.
Yeah.
I can't, if anything goes wrong here, I can't do anything. Yeah. And I never wanted to have that feeling again. I never got drunk again.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
It was a miserable feeling.
Yeah.
Well, I've never gotten past that sense of wanting to be in control of what was going on around me.
Yeah.
Now, I deal with it better now than I did back then, but it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Tools and tricks to help you deal with things.
I just had an experience actually today of someone who has taken charge of something that was not exactly what I had expected them to want to be in charge of. And so I've let them be in charge of it while sitting thinking, I wanted to be in charge of that.
Some of our greatest growth moments are where we're very uncomfortable, and that can be letting things go.
And this one's not a big one. It really is. Well, it was not hard to say, okay, sure, go ahead and do that.
In my leadership roles, it was, as I grew in leadership roles, it became necessary for me to turn that over, to give those responsibilities to other people. And it was hard initially. But I think once you realize that you're giving other people an opportunity to grow and lean into their strengths and their passions and the things that, they were built to do, and then also understanding that just because it was your great idea doesn't mean it was the best idea, which I know, Tommy, might be a shock for you, but other people do come up with great ideas. I've certainly admitted that myself. Mine is not always the best route. That was a humbling season for me, but wow, I got to see some really cool things that people would produce when I just said, okay, I'm stepping back, hands off. You go do this the way that you want to do it, and I'm going to distract myself with something over here that I'm going to control over here.
The good side for me, and I've always been able to do this even when it didn't come naturally, is it's not real hard for me to step back and turn something over to someone if I know they're better at it than I am. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I am never going to be the minister of music of anything anywhere in my life. It is not hard for me to pick good people for that and get out of their way, because I'm not going to be good at that. Yeah. I know that. Yeah. I am not great at children's ministry. I love children, thoroughly enjoy being with them, but I'm not the person to lead that ministry, so pick a good person, get out of their way.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can experience twists of fate in all parts of our life. We've talked a little bit about some community with the Virginia Tech shooting, and that was tragic and horrific on every possible level. And I know that you dealt with the repercussions of that for a long time and still are in support mode and now called in as reinforcements when, unfortunately, other mass shootings happen in other places. And we're grateful. And those communities are grateful that you and your teams do that. We talked a little bit about relationship, but the twists of fate can also come at work. No. And that can happen with job assignments. It can happen with job loss. Right now we have been in a season where some companies are not doing well. Positions have been eliminated. In our church family, we've had quite a few that have been impacted by plants closing or just positions being eliminated, teams being downsized, centralized, all kinds of scenarios. But that loss, it's still a loss, and you're still grieving through that loss because your career or your job or your future with a company is not what you expected it to be.
It can really upend you if you. I guess a better way to let me put it on a personal basis. I've pastored 5 churches. 4 of those did extremely well. 1 of them did not do well at all. Finally, to the point where I was miserable, they were miserable. It was an opportunity presented itself to get out of it, and so I did. But it really rattled my confidence at that point because why did this not go well? Why am I having to walk away from something that I'd always thought I was good at? It really was one of those moments when you just had to stop and evaluate, where you were and what you did, and in my case, had to lean back on your faith because you had to believe that God called you into this for a purpose, and maybe that one wasn't it.
Yep. So Isaiah 55:9 says God's ways are higher than our ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was one of those. I've got a big story could go with that, but we don't have time for that big story right now.
Whole nother conversation, probably.
That's a whole different time to go into that one. But it was one of those. I made a bad choice. It was you thought it was making a good choice, made a bad choice, went to a place I didn't fit, and it didn't feel like I fit when I was going.
Yeah.
And so then you had to step back and say, okay, numbskull, why did you do this?
So I'll tell you what I tell my coaching clients is we all do those, by the way. And while it is so important to understand and act on what you like and where you feel that you're being pulled to go, it is equally, if not more important, to know what you don't like. And some of your non-negotiables, like what you absolutely do not want to deal with or be faced with. Because when those things materialize, and they will, you're going to have to deal with them. And if you're not prepared for that, if you, for whatever reason, whether it's past trauma or it's just lack of skill or just the absolute non-desire to be in that arena, you're going to have to figure out a way to navigate through it until you can exit. So
I had a close friend who's in the business world a number of years ago, and he started with a company when he was in his 20s and very quickly moved up the ladder, got good promotions, so forth. And his boss called him one day and asked him to come in, and he thought he was going to get another promotion, and he got laid off. And he said it was, number one, the most embarrassing moment he had ever had in his life because he said, it never crossed my mind that that's what was going to happen that day. And he said, and they made it very clear it wasn't because of a job performance issue. It was that what he did, they were farming out to someone else. But he said it was one of the most embarrassing moments. He said, I went out, got in my car, got dressed in a suit, drove around Atlanta for a week before I could tell my wife what had happened. And he said, I became a partner in the company I'm in right now and have done very well and would never have gone and done that if it hadn't been for that uninvited experience, that twist of fate that hit him there.
Yeah. The reality is when these twists of fate happen, as hard as they are, it does shape our character. Hopefully, we are leaning into it and it deepens our empathy for other people because I promise you there will be a situation that comes up that you can go, oh yeah, this moment is why I had that experience. And then it helps us build resilience because otherwise, how would we become stronger if we're not faced with some of these challenges?
The things that keep running through my mind, though, is when you have those twists of fate and you don't really see a positive that ever came out of it, how do you deal with that?
Well, in my experience, you have to have some really tough conversations with yourself. And those generally are, even if I don't like how things turned out, what did I learn? And again, this goes back to what I was saying just a minute ago. what you learn can be positive things, but what you learn can also be a negative thing. Like, I don't like this. I don't like that type of leader. I don't like that type of environment. So I'm not going to do that going forward. You may also, in some of that reflection, find that you were not your best you in those situations. And when you uncover that and you are humble enough to be able to uncover that, because there's definitely humility there, then you can do something about it and say, okay, if I'm going to not have this happen again, how do I change that? And if you're not sure what to do with that, there's lots of things and resources that can help. Counselors can help. I mean, that's one of the things that they do a lot of. And a great thing that they do a lot of is helping people explore those types of things. Coaches like me, that's one of the things that I do with clients, is helping them understand, let's tie back what's happened in your past to what your path is going forward. And let's figure out how we're going to make that a productive learning. But a lot of introspection.
Yeah. And it does take a lot of introspection. I had a situation many years ago that totally and completely caught me off guard. Someone responded to something that I just did not see coming at all, and it created a rift that was partially healed down the line, but not fully. And it took me a while to sit and look at it and think, usually when you have something like that, you can look and say, okay, this was my part of this was their part of this. When I had to step back on that one and look at it to say, and I don't have a part in this one. This was they made the decision to react that way.
And sometimes that's the way it is.
I didn't do anything wrong here. They just don't like the decision that I have made. And they're going to have to live with that, and so am I, because I'm going to go on with what I know is the right thing to do here.
Yeah, that comes up in a lot of sessions that I have with folks around boundary setting, which is some of the life coaching stuff that we do. And that's a tough one, especially when you talk about setting boundaries with family members. I've personally done that, and it was incredibly freeing when I did it. For me, it was shocking to those that I set the boundaries with. But when you do that, you can firmly say, this is what I am going to accept, and this is what I'm not going to accept, because this is what's right for me. And I am giving myself permission to do what's right for me, which is totally okay.
And that's exactly where I ended up in that situation. Was I don't know why you're reacting the way that you're reacting, but I've still got to do what's right for me in this situation. And you're going to have to figure out how you're going to live with that. Yeah,
and then sometimes when you're in those situations, that point, crossroads, if you will, is where a tough decision has to be made of what are you going to do as part of your as far as your part of that relationship goes. Are you going to try to continue to have a relationship? Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not physically and mentally or emotionally healthy for you to do that, right? So, and that's, again, another hard decision and a boundary that you would need to set, and, resources available to help people learn to do that. It's not an easy path to go, but sometimes the healthiest thing to do is to completely separate yourself from that situation, because it is absolutely not healthy.
Occasionally, though, that's harder to do if it's a family member.
It is, and blood is thicker than water, right? But that doesn't mean that the blood doesn't hurt.
Oh, yeah.
It absolutely does. And I think, having... I come from my cousins, and I have joked about this over the years about how things that came up in generations past were never discussed in our family. Everything was swept under the rug, and you don't talk about it. It could be embarrassing and all of that type of thing. And I look back, even now, we've had some things happen within relationships in various places lately, and I'm seeing the same kind of thing where it's not just my family, it's a lot of people who just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to have the hard conversation. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that I'm not going to go into, because I think that's probably a whole nother episode too, right? But we somehow have gotten to this space where it's not okay to say, this is not okay for me. It might be okay for you, but it's not okay for me. And because it's not okay for me, I'm going to make a different decision that is okay for me. And that means I'm not going to see you as much.
That's exactly what happened in the situation that I was referencing, is that it finally reached a stage where I just had to say, this is what I'm going to do. This will be good for me.
Yeah.
You're going to have to make decisions around that you need to make.
Yeah.
But we're still going to go forward just like we are, even if that creates a division.
Yeah. And honestly, being clear about where you're setting the boundary and why. One of the first times I ever had a boundary setting discussion with someone that I intentionally went into that discussion to have, I said, look, here's the situation that you are creating. And I painted it very clearly. This is what you're creating. When you do this, this is the impact it has on me. Mm-hmm. And I went into all of the emotional reaction that I go through when, I'm placed in that situation. And then when I do that, and I give you feedback on what I think you're asking me to help you solve, you discount that or you don't do what I'm suggesting that you do. Not that you have to take my suggestions, but you're getting me fired up for no reason, and that's not healthy for me. So going forward, if you do this, I'm not reacting. Mm-hmm. So they absolutely knew what to expect. And it's hard initially when you set that boundary, and then it gets tested because we can guarantee you set a boundary, it's going to be tested. Mm-hmm. Absolutely going to be tested. It's tough. But if you hold firm with what's right for you, what's healthy for you, then you can continue to reinforce that boundary.
And it will, and one way or the other, it'll work out.
It will.
That doesn't mean it's not going to have some pain and some stress that goes along with it, but it'll work out. And you still have to make decisions that ultimately is going to be best for you in the long run.
Right.
Unless it's a moral kind of issue. Sure. I mean, that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was hanged because he opposed Adolf Hitler, but he still opposed Adolf Hitler. Sometimes there are things worth standing up for, even if you know it's going to be costly. Sure. But in everyday life, usually your family member's not going to hang you. If things
I
go
certainly
wrong.
hope not. I don't think that's a Thanksgiving dinner I really want to go to
that's
anyway.
not the one that we want to be part of. No,
I'm good. Now, of course, this I do want to bring up an aspect here that some people may find themselves in when we talk about twists of fate, but then when we also talking about boundary setting, there are situations where mental health illnesses, diagnoses, or undiagnosed mental health challenges will create a situation where boundaries are set that may actually not be healthy boundaries. And in those situations, I think both of us would say the same thing. You need to get really good mental health support involved quickly. So make sure that professional is equipped to treat that particular type of situation. There's a ton of great counselors out there, but they are not all equal when it comes to very specific types of diagnoses. So you want to make sure that the person you're talking to is equipped to deal with that. And then follow those techniques that you're given, and ask for those. Ask for the resources and training, and even practice role play exercises to help strengthen that muscle of having those conversations. So those are slightly different situations, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Several months ago, I just had one of those events come up where a person was dealing with a relative that had a mental health issue and did not really want to own that mental health issue, but still there, and they had to get help for them. And I had to intervene on both sides of that. One is to get involved and say, you've got to make some hard choices here because that's all that's going to work in this situation. And then to go back and say, you're making the right choices trying to get a counselor, you've gotten the wrong one. Yeah. You've picked somebody, you picked a person because they've called themselves a Christian counselor, which is what they are, except they have no expertise in what you're trying to deal with. They don't even have any training in what you're trying to deal with. You need to get a different counselor.
Yeah.
And you need to do that soon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they wanted to debate that at first, and then I said, this isn't going to work. You can't do this. It's going to fall apart on you.
Yeah.
And it did, and so they found a different counselor.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So through all of this, through the twists of fate, another avenue that we have is leaning on God and trusting that He's got our path already defined. I know you and I both agree in that mindset. We both have our own stories with that and walk our paths, but we both fully believe that God is in control. And if you're not somebody that has that belief, that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's totally fine. We still believe that there's right. We believe that for you. We believe that for you, and we pray for you every single day. Not that you will come around to our way of thinking, but really that you will embrace that there is a plan, there is a path. Whoever created it or whoever designed it in your mind, there is something for you out there, something that you specifically were created to do.
And I will go a step further to say I don't think you'll ever be fully satisfied in your life until you find that.
I would agree.
You need to find that purpose that I think, we're people of faith. We believe God, has a plan for all of us out there, and to find that plan and to step into it gives you purpose. Yeah. It gives you meaning in your life. So.
I had somebody ask me, I was onboarding in my consulting world, I was onboarding a new associate the other day, and someone who's brand new in the HR arena has never spent a day in HR ever, and stepping into a role, and both feet, both hands, all the way. He's all in, which is fantastic, and it is wonderful to see, and he's doing a fantastic job. But what was so interesting was he asked me, as just part of our get to know you conversation, he's like, "What's your dream? What's your dream for work?" And I sat back for the first time ever, and I said, "I'm actually living it." I'm actually living it. Like the work that I'm doing, the coaching work that I'm doing, the consulting work that I'm doing, this podcast, all of the spaces, the church involvement, the family things that I get to do. I cannot point at any particular piece of my life and go, yeah, that is not at all what I was expecting it to be, and I'm not okay with it. There are places in my life where that is what I expected it to be, and I'm still not okay with it. Right? We're going to work on those. But no, professionally, I'm loving my life. Personally, I love my family, and I'm in a great season. It's not always been this way, right? Yeah. There have been seasons that have been hard. There have been seasons where I've been in the wilderness. It's a term I heard just within the last couple of years that I've totally embraced because I was there. I knew God was there, but I didn't feel him there. He wasn't talking to me. Every now and then I'd get a pull, and I'd get affirmations that I'm on the right track, but then nothing for what seemed like an eternity because you're wanting that constant validation, right? So the season that I'm in now is not the season I've been in. This is a new season for me. But it's really cool to be able to say, yeah, I am leaning into what I truly believe God built me to do. And I'm having the time of my life doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's wonderful. You're in good company, though. Mother Teresa had exactly the same kind of reaction that you did.
Okay, well,
she and you remind me a lot of Mother Teresa, of course.
That has to be the kindest thing you've ever said to me.
No, she went through her life. She had a very almost miraculous moment with God early when she was just a very young woman, what led her to Calcutta and start her ministry. But she always wanted to have another one of those aha moments like that. And what she did was she lived into the calling that she had received, always wanting to have another one of those moments. And she would write, she had a diary where she would write about her doubts, and people read those and thought she was doubting her faith. She was actually living into her faith, but still struggling with, okay, why did you call me so blatantly one time?
Right.
And then I just had to live into faith.
Figure the rest of it out.
That's right.
Well, that's what the twists of fate teach us to do, right? Is to lean into that unknown and have faith, like we talked about in our very first episode, that it's gonna work, and we have to give up control. That we know what that's going to look like, because it's probably not going to look like what we thought it was going to look like. Yeah. My life today does not at all look like what I thought it was going to look like. But in so many ways, I could not. My picture of what it was going to look like was nothing close to what I actually have. I've been blessed beyond measure. And for that, I am eternally grateful, and am continuing to look for ways that I can help other people find that same thing.
I just had a line from Mother Teresa that came into my mind. Someone asked her just a very short time before she passed away, if your time comes to stand before God, what are you going to say to him? She said, I'm going to look at him and say, you have a lot of explaining to do.
I love that. I do love that.
Oh,
yeah.
But that alone is faith. You know,
it is.
Who would even think to say, God, you need to give me some explanations here.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some practical steps that people can do to embrace when these twists happen. So one of the things that we've talked about is being present enough, either in the moment or in that season, to just pause for a minute and say, what should I be learning here? Or what can I take away from this? And I'm sure you probably got some other questions that you ask in those seasons as well.
Well, it's the same kind of thing. Is okay. What does that teach you? What are you learning right now that you would not have, whether you like it or not? What are you learning about yourself, about the situation, about those around you? What are you taking away from this that you would not have learned if it had not been for this experience?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to enjoy this experience,
Right.
or that you have to enjoy this chapter, but what are you taking away from it, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah. You can also use that time to look back and see when things have worked out in an uncertain time before. And that helps build your faith that it'll happen again. Mm-hmm. Like you were brought through once before, you'll be brought through again. It may not be quite how you think it'll look, but it'll happen.
And it may not end up exactly where you wanted it to end up. You may end up in a place to where you are more satisfied than you were before, but you didn't expect to be there. You may end up in a place to where you're not thoroughly enjoying that moment in your life, but you know that you're learning things that will be good for you down the line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You and I had a conversation a couple of years ago because I was in a space where my life wasn't quite where I thought it was going to be. And you made a comment to me, which it struck me as interesting and odd in the moment, and I've thought about it a lot since. And that was, you haven't grieved what you thought your life was going to be like. Very insightful. I know you seem impressed with yourself.
That was brilliant.
I know, right?
I didn't even remember saying it.
And you gave me a book when you said that to me. You gave me a book, and for those listening, and we can tag it in the show notes. It's called Good Grief, and it's by Granger.
Westberg.
Westberg. Thank you. So, and I've read the book, and I've since actually given it. I've passed it on to someone who was the same thing, like grieving the life that they thought they were going to have that didn't turn out that way. And their situation was completely different than mine. But in that moment, I'm like, wow, they need this. It is absolutely appropriate. And I would say probably needed to take that time to, as you're kind of reflecting and what can I learn, am I grieving appropriately for what this doesn't look like that I thought it was going to be?
I've just used that same line, and I didn't remember saying it to you, but I just used that same line with someone else who had just gone through a very unexpected divorce. And I said to them, you haven't grieved what you thought your life was going to look like. Yeah. I said, you need to take some time to do that, as well as just grieving that something fell apart that you thought would be lasting.
Right. You know? Yeah. It takes nothing away from what you have or what you will have. It's just acknowledging that, the picture that you had in your mind, you're kind of putting that to rest, I guess.
Well, and I'll go back to something I said earlier of a situation that I had to face that the people responded completely differently to how they would. And what I had to realize, I didn't realize I was doing that at the time, was I spent a lot of time grieving what could have been, what I thought would be the case, and had to work my way through that before I could get to the next decisions that needed to be made there.
Yeah. So another thing that we can do is daily prayer or meditation that can help give us peace and guidance through these transitions. And we've talked about how prayer and meditation can both be used by spiritual and non-spiritual people.
Nothing wrong with praying to God about what's going on around you. There's also nothing wrong with sitting and just meditating on the situation itself or of life or whatever, and thinking what what will my future decisions look like, or what am I going to rely on to get there?
Yeah. There was a season in my life where we were, and it was actually Brian and I were already married. And I had I had come back into my faith walk, and definitely more intentionally than I had in the past. And there was a situation that we were dealing with, and neither one of us were in control of the situation at all, but we were 100% being impacted by this situation and at a complete loss. And I remember just hugging him one night, and I prayed out loud, God, just take this. We cannot handle this. This is yours. We need you to take this from us and just show us what to do. And the immediate sense of relief that I got when I prayed that prayer, I will never forget that. And it's caused me to go back and do that in other situations since then. It's a great reminder for me to say, I don't have to carry it all. And whatever is being presented to me that I wasn't expecting, I can hand it off. It's okay. It's not deflecting. It's not shirking my responsibility. I am leaning into what I can manage, and I am handing off to someone else something that I can't.
And it's and I do that. You know, you did it through prayer. I do the same thing. Sometimes you just have to hand off what you can't deal with and trust God to make something out of it. And occasionally you have to do that with others as well. As I've gone to friends before and said, I need to be doing something that I can't do right now. Can you take this and run with this and make it? And you sort out who's on your side and who's not by how they respond to that. But usually a good friend is going to say, sure, I can do that.
Absolutely.
Or even a staff member. I mean, we work as a team here. If I go in and say something like that, I think my team knows that's not a command. That's a honest request of, you know, and I've never had one of them say, no, I can't help you with that.
Yeah. You know? So I think we can always remember, too, that God is always working behind the scenes, even when we don't see it.
God is in the hope business.
Yes.
You know, he's in the, he wants to bring hope out of whatever situation that you find yourself in. And so, moving forward with hope, at least for me, this is coming from my point of view, is it's easier when you know that you're walking with God. Yeah. You're walking with a God who's out there, who sees things more clearly than you can. And I can walk into that hope, walk into life much easier if I'm walking with that hope.
Yeah, hope helps in reconciling the idea that every single struggle that we are faced with is designed to help us become the person that we are supposed to be.
And hopefully we can become that person very well if we'll just try it.
Yeah, we just have to lean in.
That's right. Well, this has been a good discussion.
It has been another good discussion. Yeah, all right. Well, we thank you for investing your time in our messages today. We are always grateful for you. If you found today's episode helpful, please like and subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. And if you'd like to join in the conversation, or if you'd like to connect directly with Tommy or me, we'd love to hear from you. So email us at renewedminds@churchonmain.church. We hope you make it a great day and approach every day with a renewed mind. And
Have
we'll
a good
see
one,
you
folks.
next week.
Bye-bye.
Hopefully this brings a renewed perspective to the challenges and opportunities you're facing today. What steps are you going to be taking to show love and grace to everyone? If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, please send an email to renewedminds@churchonmain.church. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. Listen next week for the next Renewed Minds.